who is actually in charge of the South African National Defence Force? Is it the Commander-in-Chief, President Ramaphosa? Is it the Minister of Defence, Angie Motshekga? Is it someone else? And even more so, who is in charge of our Navy? So who's giving marching orders in that regard? These questions arise at a time when South Africa is conducting naval exercises with countries within BRICS. It's not a BRICS exercise because BRICS is not a military alliance, but countries like Russia, China, Iran are involved in these naval exercises. The question of Iran jumps first to mind, whether they are actively participating or whether they are merely observing. Countries like the United Arab Emirates as well are just observing. But we'll get into all of this in the context of South African-US relations, in the context of South Africa's position in a sort of more aggressive, more transactional geopolitical world. All of that comes to bear. Now, joining us is journalist and author at the Daily Friend, Jonathan Katzenellenbogen. Jonathan, thank you very much for joining us this Thursday morning, the 15th of January, your first of what will be many appearances this year on the CRA's YouTube channel. I'm sure lots are going to happen this year. We start with your latest piece at the Daily Friend, to which I will link in the description below. You're also trying to figure out exactly what's been going on with Iran's participation. So over the weekend, we had the presidency allegedly asking Iran to not participate actively in these naval exercises. Then you had a post on the South African National Defence Force Facebook page with pictures of the Iranian vessel ostensibly participating. So tell us, can you tell us who's in charge of the SANDF and in charge of the Navy?
I read that same article in the Daily Maverick by Peter Fabricius, who's a very reliable journalist. And the story that he has is that the Navy, Iran was asked to withdraw by South Africa. Who asked them? I suppose the message went through the Department of Foreign Affairs. And then an Iranian vessel went out with with vessels from South Africa, China, and Russia in these exercises. And but who knows? Might the Iranians have just been observing? Did they stay on as observers? Who knows? But I mean, the diplomatic damage has really been done. Here they tell, after 12 days of street protests, and many having been shot in Iran of those demonstrators, South Africa still goes ahead with the exercises. They might well have told the Iranians, look, this is getting a bit embarrassing. Do you mind turning around, while they were at sea on their way to Simonstown? So who knows what's going on? They also say, well, we didn't really invite the Iranians because it's the Chinese. Well, South Africa is hosting it. It's in South African waters, and they might well have asked for us. And just as the U.S. Congress is considering the renewal of the AGOA, Africa Growth and Opportunity Act, which gives trade preferences to a large number of African countries, including South Africa. South Africa goes ahead with this. And last time, with just the exercise with Russia and China alone last year, and the year before Trump was elected, when the Biden administration was in office, it caused a great rupture, and just as I think it was more of a shot across the bows. It didn't pass, but for a resolution backed by a Republican and a Democrat for the Biden administration to keep a keen eye on on relations with South Africa, because of this dissatisfaction sparked by these maneuvers with the Russians and the Chinese. One would have thought in those circumstances that indeed, they would would have been cautious in actually going ahead with this. But no, they seem to be almost out to annoy the Americans in some way. America has asked, don't do this. South Africa says, no, we won't be bullied, and goes ahead. South Africa had diplomatic outs, and to have Iran as part of this is, particularly at the moment when they're shooting people on the streets, is just sheer embarrassing. this year is the 50th anniversary of the Soweto uprising, which arguably was the beginning of the end for apartheid. And one would think there would be greater sensitivity to that, but no. It amazes me of what they're doing in their relations with Iran. I know they're what they would call strategic considerations. MTN is a license holder to operate a cell network in Iran. But there are no other compelling commercial or other reasons to have this close relationship with the Iranians, or to even invite them on this.
I'm still waiting for a statement from DIRCO or the presidency or other about expressing their concerns about what's been going on in Iran, but not yet. That is yet to materialize. Jonathan,
I'm not waiting. I don't expect it at all.
Maybe I live in hope. It's still the January, the New Year hope. So I probably you will be proven correct.
At some stage, I'll have to make remarks. Now I see that Merz this week, the German Chancellor, said this is the end. This is the beginning of the end, effectively. And there are other signs that indeed it is. How the actual takeover will take place, we don't know. What I see that Trump says seems to intimate that for the moment they're not going to use any force on the Iranians, but as they're not shooting people, but they're contrary indications. I see on the BBC Persian service this morning that they are in fact shooting people on the streets, many people on the streets.
I see there is a US aircraft carrier strike group is moving from, I believe, sort of Asia side to the Middle East, but it would take them about 2 weeks. Not that you need a carrier station there to conduct some sort of targeted strikes. I mean, B-2s and other aircraft that were used last year to hit Iranian nuclear facilities, those are available to the Trump administration. So let's see. Jonathan, just getting back to your article, I guess to put you on the spot here, what's the kindest interpretation I could say? Let's say that the presidency did give the SANDF, this instruction, follow these marching orders, and then the defense ministry decided not to do that. So is that, I guess, the kindest reading for President Ramaphosa, that his minister is acting against him, not that he instructed his minister to act in this kind of direction? But then again, why is he not acting yet against that minister?
Yes. No, that raises those sorts of questions. Certainly, why aren't his, why is he not firing? You had this incident last year when the chief of the defense force went to visit Iran, and he said, "Oh, we're best friends and allies." And then the presidency said, no, he wasn't instructed to do this, and so forth. I think it would have been a very scripted message. So I wouldn't have been surprised if the DIRCO is backing out of this because of the embarrassment of this. But one would have thought that, after that, they would have exercised far greater caution. It amazes me that they didn't, and they just sort of fall into these incidents which serve to further deteriorate, worsen relations with the United States. You had the ambassador last year, Mr. Rasul, make these statements about colonialism and how the US was part of a evil colonial empire. And he gets kicked out for that. And one would think that, they would exercise far greater caution, as, they seem to trip up at every stage in relations with the US.
Jonathan, have you seen any sort of indications in statements by other departments or by political parties in the GNU that the parties other than the ANC are concerned about what's going on? So what does this episode tell you about sort of GNU foreign policy? And I know that's difficult because the GNU is ostensibly a sort of grand coalition.
Well, I see that the man with your name, with your namesake, Chris Hattingh, who's the DA's defense spokesperson, is asking questions about the exercises with Iran. But I don't know if he's received any answers yet. But I think that more parties should be asking questions, and also the South African silence on what's going on in Iran. You know, when anything concerns Israel, you know, South Africa is loud and clear. But but on Iran and the Islamic Republic, it's absolutely silent. You know, there've been ongoing demonstrations for a long, long time, and it's absolutely silent on this. I think one thing that the ANC can't absorb really is that here we have a fellow revolutionary government, and I think the ANC likes to see itself as a revolutionary government, teetering, and it would be if indeed the Iranians fall in the next few weeks or months, it would be really number two. I mean, the Maduro regime, what remains of it without Maduro, is still in power, but it's under US constraints, put it that way. So I think that the world is changing fast for the ANC, and it will have to adapt. You know, we're going to have the next Iranian government, whether it's overwhelmingly pro-US or not, is certainly going to remember South Africa's friendly relations with the Islamic Republic. And, you know, commercially it doesn't, it's not of much consequence. And as I said earlier, you know, you have MTN there, but even so, they seem to be out for South Africa, seems to be out to have a very special relationship. And I think you know, we've got to ask the reasons for that. You know, there've been suggestions, but not proven, that the ANC payroll was helped out by the Iranians, but that's very, very, very difficult to prove.
Jonathan, just a little bit on the sort of, again, if we assume there's these two camps in the presidency and in the defense ministry and the SANDF, could one call it a sort of soft coup if the defense minister and generals just ignore marching orders from the presidency, from the commander in chief? Is it just a straight out coup? How do we understand?
You know, as I said earlier, I don't think there's any hard proof of that. You know, does the Department of Defense really want to go out on a limb on relations with Iran? I doubt it. And last year, the we are told that the chief of staff was admonished for his friendly remarks towards Iran. So once they've said that, and there's been no sort of comeback from the defense force, you know, that's taken. I think to prove that this is in any way the defense force not following through, I don't think the evidence is there yet. And particularly as the defense force might have broadly interpreted this. No, you can't take narrowly define this for its own purposes, maybe, and said, okay, the president has given the instructions that you're not to take part in these exercises, but you can still be observers. I know, was that the instruction? In that case, you know, they went out on this, it could possibly, I don't know, but I'm just pointing to the possibility of this. So to call it call this a case of the defense force not following the commander in chief, who's the president's orders, I don't think it's not proven. I think it's going a step too far at this stage.
Yeah, I agree with your reasoning there. Jonathan, going back to your article, you write, and I quote, "South Africa likes grandstanding in foreign policy to prove its moral worth and endlessly demonstrate that it is neutral and pursuing its own path. Its closest friends are dictatorships who supported the liberation struggle, like Russia and Cuba, and other countries considered revolutionary. End quote. Just in that regard, what would be the sort of low-hanging fruit in terms of shifting that, how South Africa has conducted itself? So do you continue to conduct exercises with those countries, but then you also do with countries like France, perhaps the UK, Germany, and others? How do you start to shift that and that perception which has taken hold in Washington, I think?
I think, they a few years last year, the year before, I think they held exercises with the Germans. I don't think they've held any exercises with the Americans or the Brits for some years. They might have held, I think there were military exercises or in the Free State a few years ago between the Americans and South Africa. So, they don't cut themselves off entirely, but I doubt if under the Trump administration, the Americans would really like to have joint exercises with South Africa. I think South Africa would, I don't know, and I don't know how South Africa would regard. Look, relations are bad, and South Africa doesn't want to be seen to be bullied. And part of this not wanting to be bullied is that we're going to do as we wish. Damn Trump, he's in power for another 3 years, and we'll just have to ride it out. But you don't know who you might have in power after Trump. If it's Rubio, it would be very much the same. And even bear in mind that the Democrats also don't see South Africa in the same sort of benign way that they did in the Mandela years and the Mandela legacy years. All that has fundamentally changed.
No, absolutely. I think reality is shifting very quickly, and those countries that don't deal with that, it's going to be to the cost of their citizens ultimately in terms of sort of trade opportunities, investment, and never mind the defense and military side.
Well, the speculation is that some sort of punitive action could be forthcoming at some stage from the Trump administration. And what they do is they target high up ANC individuals. They'd freeze their overseas bank accounts and make it difficult for them to travel. I see that the former foreign minister, Naledi Pandor, was denied a US visa. And that might be a sign of things to come with tougher with tougher action.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, very much so.
And
the question is,
Trump, just on the eve of South Africa's maneuvers with the Russians, Chinese, and the Iranians, Trump said anyone who does business, any country that does business with Iran would face an extra 25% tariff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'll need to go and check again. I don't think we do that much trade with Iran, but you would think any trade will open one up to those tariffs. So you add that to our 30% that we've got already, possibly another 10% for being part of BRICS.
But they could say, any dealings with Iran. No, we don't. We don't import, and we don't import oil from Iran nowadays, unless it's illicitly through some sort of back channel. But I doubt if we do. The oil companies wouldn't be able to do that, but and wouldn't do that, I suspect. But I think that what the major markets for Iran at the moment are China and India.
Mm-hmm. Jonathan, just a final question as we come to wrapping up our discussion. I want to get your take on, we've talked a little bit about how South Africa could, shift some of the perception or the narrative on the military exercises side. What about on the diplomatic signaling side? So would that be as basic as a statement from Durko, the presidency, condemning the killing of Iranian citizens by the regime in Tehran?
I imagine that could help. That could help. And they could issue a sort of a toned-down statement, not overwhelmingly calling for calm on both sides, something like that. But I don't know if that would do. I think things have gone
Sure.
so far with the US now, and we're in Trump's sights that I think that I get the sense that he'll have to do something. And you know, our statement on Maduro was a pretty hard line. You know,
Yes.
you know. It wasn't a defense of the Maduro, it was more a defense of sovereignty, which is the argument that any foreign ministry who is against being put on trial, even in the United States, would issue. You know, and the precedent isn't a very good one. So that was a sort of I don't think a statement that. You know, we know that Venezuela was a friend of the ANC's, but the statement itself wasn't, it didn't go overboard, put it that way. But could South Africa shift its stance, you asked, and come up with some sort of moderate statement on Iran? Well, let's see. I think, you know, once the government is gone, if government is gone and the Islamic Republic is not going to come back anytime soon, but we don't know. I think South Africa is still watching and seeing which way the cookie will crumble. You know, you just might get a Revolutionary Guard general in charge, in which case South Africa could be in a better position. But, you know, also there's great uncertainty. And what one could find is that there are a number of changes in government in the weeks and months going forward.
Yeah, definitely so. It would be good just to get some kind of principled, consistently principled statement from South Africa.
Yes, absolutely. Particularly over this one. You know, it is deeply a human rights issue, and that can't be avoided.
Yeah.
You know, they've been living, the Iranians have been living under this very repressive government for the past 47 years.
Yeah, indeed. We will monitor closely what continues to develop in Tehran and around the country, and of course what happens in South Africa with our contradictory, very often, more often than not, contradictory foreign policy and geopolitical statements. Jonathan, thank you very much for your time. I highly recommend everyone who watched this and joined us go and read Jonathan's latest piece as well as others on the Daily Friend. Jonathan will have you back very soon. To the rest of you, thank you very much for joining us, and we'll have much more from the CRA throughout the rest of this month and into 2026. Until next time, this has been Chris Hattingh for the Center for Risk Analysis. Take care.
Thanks, Chris.